Okay, good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Paso Basin Cooperative Committee to order and invite everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, please.
Committee member Dodd. Here. Thank you. Committee member Gibson.
Here.
Committee member Hammond.
Here.
Chair.
Here. And Ms. Blakeslee, will you walk us through meeting protocol?
Yes, thank you. Just as a reminder for folks in attendance, the way that this meeting will be run today is there will be a presentation from staff on each agenda item, followed by a discussion among the committee members, which will be facilitated by staff or the chair, at which time after each item, there will be a time for public comment. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So if you would like to make a public comment, please come up to the podium. There will be a timer for 3 minutes, and you'll see a warning light when you're at, I believe it's 30 seconds, you'll see the yellow, so you'll know you have to speed it up. And then for those in person, we'll take those public comments first. And then second, if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand indicating you have a public comment, and we'll take you there. And then if you're plugging in via phone, just let us know with your voice if you have a public comment there. We ask that you avoid discussions and using the chat to have separate side discussions because everyone here in this room isn't privy to those. And so to keep the meeting transparent and efficient, please refrain from that and use the public comment periods to make those comments. And lastly, just a reminder to put your cell phones on mute to ensure that we stay focused. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So item 5, let's take public comment on items not.
Thank you, Chair, for very well.
Let me get your mic.
Good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Just real quick, I know, I guess we're going to find out today. We turned in our, on April 1st, our annual report to the DWR. And I'd like to know what's going to be done to discuss the topic of the 21,000 acre feet of over irrigation between the ET and the actual factors that are supposed to be used. And also I'd like to know what's being calculated into the lined irrigation ponds that are filled with pumped groundwater with no protection from evaporation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment in person? Online, Taylor?
No, not seeing any public comment online.
Okay. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment and move on to item 6. Is there any response to prior public comments?
At this meeting, there are nothing to report.
Great. Well, let's move on to item 7. First report item, Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Draft statement of equity continues to evolve. It's actually been a really interesting conversation since we brought it up here at our last meeting, and I have distributed to members of the committee what I'm calling my third draft, or version 3 of this statement of equity. Taylor circulated the second draft, which was the result of conversations I'd had with a variety of individuals, the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance and Farm Bureau and others. The difference from the second draft to the third draft is in track change mode in the red that you see there. I'll go through a little bit about the substance of the comments that I've received and tried to incorporate into the most recent draft, and then maybe have a bit of a discussion about how we proceed from here. You know, as I mentioned when I brought this up the first time, my vision for this is as something that all of the GSAs that are responsible for the Paso Basin would eventually endorse common language, that we would come to a document, an expression on equity that would be agreeable to all. Now that's sort of putting together a statement by committee, which has its obvious challenges. But I feel like we're getting pretty close. I haven't heard any overt opposition to the concept. And again, my thought is that what we could do at a point, perhaps as early as our next PBCC meeting, would be to have had each GSA endorse a statement as a expected update to the GSP. And it, you know, we don't need to update the GSP just for this. We got one coming in very short order here, but that this would be a guiding document that we'd all agree to, and at a point when we're open up the GSP, we would drop this in. So the comments that I got since last time, I really fall into three categories, and the changes that I made in developing the second version and then the third are these. I got comments from a variety of sources that this document shouldn't really speak too much to the specifics of particular projects. That was making folks nervous in the sense of perhaps locking us into specific results in specific projects. And so in forming the second draft, I pulled those out, tried to make this more a general statement of principle. And I would say I should absolutely acknowledge Shannon San Juan, who this morning sent their comments on this. There was one comment which wanted a little bit more of the specifics put back in, so we can figure out how we go with that. The second thing, and this came out of a very productive discussion I had with the Government Affairs Committee of the Wine Country Alliance, was to make an expression of two concepts. One of them is the value of ag's use of water, that it's important. Ag uses, you know, we note that ag uses a huge majority of the water in this basin, and there was a sense that they wanted to see a expression that ag is valued. And, you know, and as a former grower, I certainly know it takes water to grow food and fiber. The second thing is, in terms of addressing equity, there should be a measure of reasonableness attached to everything. You know, that we're not trying to make everybody equal. We're trying to take, you know, we're not trying to do things that are infeasible financially or legally or in any way, shape, or form, that we should guarantee, or we should be approaching equity as to the reasonable access of every user has reasonable access to water. So if I might, and then I'd be interested in any thoughts that my colleagues have here, let me just walk you through. Again, we had paper copies. I think we probably had enough for everybody to get one if you wanted one. Here's the difference now in the third draft. I added a second paragraph. The first paragraph talks about the GSP assuring both sustainable and equitable access to the use of a shared resource. And so to speak to the value of ag use, I added a paragraph to this draft that says sustainable management of a reliable groundwater supply is crucial to the ongoing health and well-being of our community's residents and their economic interests, especially our valued agricultural economy, and is also crucial to the natural environment upon which that economy depends. So it's both an expression of the value of ag and also bringing in the idea that we manage this water for environmental reasons as well. And so that speaks to the sustainability. And then it goes on to speak to the concept of equity. As we get down to the bullet points, I'm going to sort of include all the feedback I've gotten. The second bullet point, Shannon San Juan pointed out that there are multiple small mutual water supply systems. And so it's not in the third draft, but I would note that there are, users' water supplies are managed in diverse jurisdictional settings, including small mutual water supply systems, plural. And then Shannon San Juan also pointed out that one of the challenges of achieving equitable access is that Sigma emphasized that it would not change California water law. And so that is a challenge, the water rights are not directly affected by SIG. So I would certainly support putting in one more bullet that emphasizes Sigma is not doing that. And then the last real change comes in the paragraph right below the last bullet. It's the bottom of the first page. The central premise of Sigma is that the subbasin's groundwater is sustainably managed, and I added reasonably accessible to all users. So that was the concept of reason. So that and one more minor typo on the back page, that no user is precluded from maintaining reasonable access to groundwater. So those would be, again, not all of these smaller changes are reflected in the paper that I put out, but I'd offer that as the latest, and I'd be interested in commentary and thoughts on how we proceed.
Can you explain a little more on that Sigma? You're explaining point that's not on here, Sigma.
Yeah, so coming from Shannon San Juan was a comment that their ad was the legislation forming Sigma and subsequent state legislation went to lengths to clearly state that Sigma will not change California water law 10720.5. And then there's a parenthesis B, and there was this, and it looked like there might have been something else that I didn't catch, but that was what Shannon San Juan brought forth.
Expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add, John, but it's been somewhat discussed kind of all around the state that Sigma is, creating these frameworks for which basins need to be managed, and explicitly doesn't change water rights. And that certainly seems like a conflict in certain situations. And I think the state has not fully explained the intention behind that statement, but I think there were members of our board that thought that was important in a statement of equity, just to clarify that. But I think this, I appreciate your effort, Supervisor Gibson, putting this together. I think this is an excellent statement, and I think the process that you're recommending makes sense to me, that we would submit this to all 4 GSAs, current GSAs, for consideration and adoption, with the intent that this language be incorporated into the next update of the GSP. Kind of framing why part of the why we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you. I think that's great. And
Yeah, I don't really have any major concerns, actually. I think what I'd like to see is the final work.
Yeah.
It's still a work in progress, seems like, Bruce, but certainly bring it back to our staff and we can get over it, make more further comments.
council.
Well, yeah, or bring it to the council after we kind of review it.
Yeah, we
with
get a
staff.
final proposal.
Right.
And again, now it gets tricky that we've got a set of language. But let me get Kelly's thoughts on it before I go too far. Yeah.
I was just going to say, in general, I think it does cover most of the concerns that I think my board's had, and seems like the public in general has had. And Matt's bullet point there was, I think, pretty spot on. We need to make sure that it does mention that, because that is not, we're not trying to change water law here. The state's not trying to change water law as far as they say with Sigma. So I think just acknowledging that is important. and moving forward.
So I know we had public comment to take on
Yes.
this, but my proposal would be for me to deliver to Blaine and Taylor, you know, the proposed, the version of this which incorporates these small changes and feedback. Again, we can listen to public comment. And have them then send it back to all four GSAs and perhaps EPC as well to ask if they would formally, each board of each GSA would formally adopt this.
So, question, Blaine or Taylor, did they, I didn't think I saw this in the agenda packet. Does the public have this?
Yes, Supervisor Gibson brought a hard copy, 25 hard copies that were distributed.
Right.
I think, a show of hands, did everyone get a copy?
Back table? Right, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, each would be agendized as a public, on a public agenda for
Within
action.
the GSAs.
Each
right?
GSA separate.
Yeah, well, let's take public comment. I don't think we need to take action on this.
No, it can't. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So I'll go ahead and open up for public comment on the update on the statement of equity. Patricia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, my name is Patricia Wilmore. I'm here on behalf of the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. I just want to say a couple things. One is to thank Supervisor Gibson for meeting with our committee and for capturing very well, I think, what our two major points were in regards to this. I have to say that when I first brought up the term to some of our members, it was quite a wide-eyed response.
Yeah.
What is this and why do we need it? And so go to the source. So, you know, we invited Supervisor Gibson to come and speak with us and really tell us what the philosophy of this was. And we agreed that in concept, it is really helpful, I think, to our future actions, which of course will come from the GSP, as to how we're going to manage this basin. So again, thank you for making this a process also. I think that was really important, that people had time to make comments, to meet with key players on this endeavor. And here we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Graywall.
Greg Graywall. I like the idea. I don't know why we have to rebuild something that's already built. We already have correlative rights. We already have a state constitution that gives us our beneficial and reasonable use that we've been fighting over for the last 10 or 11 years. And it was the emergency ordinance that created a lot of the hysteria and problems and overplanting and over well drilling and everything else that went on. But you can't keep asking the people in the unincorporated area that have one source of water to not do anything while the communities keep building. That's not fair. That's not equitable. So if you're not going to use best management practices by using all your Nacimiento water every year, or you're not going to use best management practices by not using any of the state water that's available at the Shandon turnout, then I don't know where the equity comes in. The equity is everybody is supposed to use their other sources that have other sources if there's an issue. And if there's not an issue, then that's fine. Then there's more safe yield that people can use. But if you're claiming that there's no safe yield, then you have to go back to the court order on what the amount of water you're allowed to take from the basin is, and be more equitable with the people that only have one way to get water, and that's from their well. And then the rest of it, there is no constitutional depth on what your well can be, but you can't everybody's got to be reasonable. You can't over irrigate a specific area. We had one general area in the Estrella area. The city's on one side, people live on the other side. You've got 500 homes with shallow wells, and you put in 2 wells that are 850 feet deep. And then you wonder why their wells are going dry. And those houses were there and built at different periods of time before all that ag went in around them. I have nothing against ag. I love ag. I think the thing's great, but you got to be reasonable about overdoing a specific area, because we can go to 3 targeted areas and see what was there first and what was put around them and where the problem lies. And El Pomar, they didn't have a problem with the shallow wells until 2 giant ponds went in and 800 acres was planted, right when this whole thing was starting. And I don't see anybody from that organization going to help the people who they suck dry around. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Willie Cunha. I'm a farmer out in Shandon, former member of this board and a member of the board of the Shandon San Juan GSA. Yeah, I'm totally supportive of this effort and the final draft you guys will come up with. I still like the idea of this little first paragraph that Bruce has would be your equity statement. And then these things that we're addressing below that would kind of be how we're planning to cooperatively implement our GSPs in the next steps as we're taking them. How do we equitably approach each of these problems? The problems are so big, diverse, and complex. When the state legislature wrote this legislation, it wasn't easy, and they passed the buck because it's really difficult. A lot of people have property or issues that are going to be significantly changed, in their mind, perhaps harmed. It's the same thing when we wrote the GSP. We knew we could have written a lot stronger language in there, but we weren't to the point where we could make those hard decisions. I mean, you folks sit on other boards and you make a lot of decisions for your local government that have the same issue. You just can't leap to the conclusion that you know is obvious. And so we need to bring the public along step by step as we go ahead on how we equitably approach each of these problems. And the outline of the ones that caught Bruce's attention is a great outline. I think there's a bunch more that different parties would want stuck in there, some that some folks would not want in there. But I would keep it simple and then have that outline of here's how we're going to equitably approach. But I'm out in the cheap seats. Thanks, guys. Appreciate all your work.
We do have one public comment online.
Great, let's take that.
Susan?
Hi, everybody. This is Susan Harvey. I'm speaking for the San Lucia chapter of the Sierra Club and North County Watch. And I want to thank Bruce for bringing this issue forward. I only have a copy of the March 13th first draft, but I really appreciate and want to comment on his including section 106 because it's so important for residential people to understand that there are protections in the state constitution for their access to water. I think this is a wonderful idea, and I'm really pleased that in his comments today, Bruce has also brought in the issue of environmental protections and reasonable access, et cetera, and also the extent to which it's clear that the ag community has participated in drafting this. I think it's encouraging, and I want to thank everybody who participated. I've sat on water committees for a really long time, and I think we've coming to a really good position together to actually tackle this problem in a way that will be equitable and to everybody who has to rely on the water. So thanks again so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Murray Powell. I'm on the monitoring committee. I'm also a vice chair of TAG. I'm speaking for myself today. A couple of suggestions. When you have a new draft on something that was presented at the last meeting, it'd be helpful if that draft was circulated as part of the agenda before the meeting, unless I missed it. And secondly, when you're discussing changes to the draft that you handed out today, it would be helpful if you could put the changes up on the boards up here so we could actually take a look at what you're talking about. It was kind of hard to hear today. I don't have great hearing, but it would be helpful to see what, when you propose, when you're making discussions on proposing changes or adding things, if you could put that verbiage up on the board so everybody could take a look at it. Anyway, that was my suggestion. So for comments, you know, I have a little problem with the term equity and how many times it's used in this draft. You know, going back to the water code, section 106, it's one sentence. It says it's hereby declared to be established policy in this state that the use of water for domestic purposes is the highest use of water, and the next highest use is for irrigation. So when you look at this draft, a couple things, and I appreciate Supervisor Gibson's taking the time and effort to put this on. I'm generally in agreement with all this. I just think some of the wording is a little questionable or undefined in here. And, you know, in this draft, it basically recognizes that every human being has a right to safe, clean, affordable, accessible water adequate for human consumption, cooking, and sanitary purposes. That sounds like domestic use to me. So my point is, if you look at this and you also look at the water code, that that domestic use comes first. It's not equitable when compared to ag use. I mean, I am all for ag use, okay, but domestic use comes first. Down in the last sentence of this revised draft, says the central premise of Sigma is that the sub-basin groundwater is substantially managed and reasonably accessible to all users. So,
Murray, that's the time.
huh?
That's your 3 minutes.
No, I know. If you give me one more minute.
Chair, do you want to?
Sure.
And I think that needs to be looked at, because if domestic use comes first, then the reasonableness is not applied to domestic versus ag.
Thank you. Seeing no more public comment, I think we'll close this item and do as we just.
Are you amenable to that?
Yes.
And so let me just, in the details of that, I'll go ahead and, based on this conversation, make these changes. With, let me just respond to Shannon San Juan, since I know you spent a lot of time doing it, and Mr. Cunha, I respect his opinion greatly. The intent is that first paragraph is the main statement of equity, and everything that follows is an expansion of those concepts. So I would propose to keep it as it is. And the other thing, Shannon San Juan asked for a specific sentence about to be put back in, and with respect, I would leave it out as in terms of keeping this a more general statement. So if Shannon San Juan is comfortable with that, we'll put that together.
Can we hear the sentence or what it is?
So the sentence that was in there was, it goes in the paragraph. Let's give the proper context here. There's a paragraph that starts, and it is on the back side. There's the top paragraph on the back side was modified as follows. It says, equity in achieving these goals requires no user is precluded from, in this case, maintaining reasonable access to groundwater because they lack financial resources. For example, the management objectives and minimum thresholds outlined in this GSP, Chapter 8, admit the possibility of shallow wells going dry. Such wells often serve disadvantaged residential communities and users who may be challenged to pay for improvements like deepening the well or drilling a new one. And then there was a sentence that I struck that Shannon San Juan would like to see back. that reads, "Subbasin mitigation programs for this undesirable result should account for the economic resources available to affected users." And so it was thought by some that I talked to that that spoke rather specifically to the project level. And so, you know, I would take the consensus of my colleagues up here as to whether you'd like that sentence in there or not. I'm easy either. I had it in there myself. I'm also comfortable pulling it out, but
Yeah, now reading it, basically, I agree that it would be a project under basically what we're going to be working on in the future.
Yeah.
So why do we want to put it into a
I mean,
statement?
a project will be evaluated, any project, any management action will be evaluated against this statement
Right.
for its equity.
Agree. I think that would probably be better to leave it out.
Are you, I can show you
Yeah.
again, that's the sentence that was pulled. And, you know, obviously, while Kelly looks at that, obviously, you know, 4 GSAs, 16 different opinions, you know, and we're going to be asked to agree on one set of words here. So I'm, you know, I would advocate for an open-minded and expansive look.
Okay.
Supervisor, for clarity on the direction, is what I heard from you is that there's going to be a version that you're going to send out
I'm going to send you and
to Blaine and myself, and we'll distribute it to
Each of the
folks and the stakeholders.
Yes, and
we'll get it out
and your full distribution
Sure.
list with the indication that that the intent of this committee, the direction of this committee was for each GSA to take it up for formal endorsement.
Perfect.
And that was going to be my comment too, Bruce, is that, you know, transparency wise, we should have these kind of documents in our agenda so
Absolutely.
people can see it. And
Absolutely.
that's why I was asking, you know, had they seen this before and we're talking about it, they should have something, you know, either in that or on the screen where we can certainly go over it. So,
Fair enough.
all right.
So again, just a little bit more clarification. So if we distribute to our stakeholder list, which is pretty substantial, and we request that any suggested edits be submitted back to?
No, this is the proposed, I would suggest, and my colleagues here can agree, is that the PBCC has agreed that this is the proposed draft statement on equity that is going to be submitted as it is to each of the 4 GSAs for public endorsement, Board of Supervisors, and the other decision-making bodies.
Okay, and then if we receive,
If you see comments,
then we
they can
distribute,
be-
we share that with the
Sure.
PBC members.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate that.
So let's move on to item number 8, a report on spring 23 groundwater levels. Mr. Ely?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a quick report. April is the month that we collect our spring round of groundwater level measurements throughout the county in the Paso Robles groundwater basin. The county collects measurements in about 100 wells, or we have 100 wells on our list. This spring, we've been out to every well. We've measured 87 of them. 11 were not measured because of some problem with the well, obstruction, some limited access. 2 of those 100 wells were determined to be dry. And then additionally, both the EPC Water District and Shannon San Juan Water District independently collect measurements in, a total of 58 wells. And they shared that information with us. We've compiled that. I'm going to give you the results here in a few minutes, but with a caveat that we're still in the process of doing our QA on these measurements. So there are a few measurements that we probably need to take a look at. They might need to be rechecked. The other caveat is that these, and you've seen this before in other reports, we only measure these are 2 points in time in the year, one in April, a single measurement, and one in October. Depending on what's happening around that particular well, it may not be exactly representative of that particular water level, over a period of time.
Yeah.
So it's a snapshot, and so keep that in mind. But we did, these wells are being measured after really the tail end of a nice wet season, and we wanted to share with you what those results are. So Taylor? So this is just a graphic that shows you the distribution of the wells that we've measured. And again, this includes the 100 wells in the county network, and then the wells that both EPC and Shannon San Juan measure independently. The Shannon San Juan EPC wells are those larger, sort of darker green dots. There's confidentiality associated with each of these wells in our network, so we try to be careful about what we display. So you can get a general idea of where the wells are located, but not a specific location. That's the reason for doing it the way we do it. You can see there, we had 2 wells that were not visited. That was due to access problems or issues. The other wells, the red wells, are wells that were visited, but when a measurement attempt was made, there was a problem. Very few, really, over 95% of the wells that were visited were measured. And so, Taylor, let's just look at the results. There we go. So this is what we decided to display the results this way. So what this is a histogram, bar chart, basically. The column there, with the tallest column, that represents 48 wells that had water levels that went up from last spring. This is a comparison, spring 2022 to spring 2023, that went up. So 48 wells had water levels that rose between basically 0 and 9 feet. And then as you move to the right, each column represents wells with greater increases in water levels. So kind of better news as you move to the right. So we had 34 wells that had groundwater levels that rose between 9 and 19 feet, 18 up to almost 30 feet. We had a few wells on the far right side with water levels that rose nearly 70 feet. So really seeing a response to the nice wet season that we saw. Groundwater levels, for the most part, throughout the basin, increased in water levels. We did see a few wells that had declines in their water level. That chart with the 11, those were 11 wells that water levels that dropped between 1 and 11 feet, and then a few more as you extend to a handful of wells where we saw water levels dropping, with 2 way out on the far left side, with water levels dropping between 50 and 60 feet. Those are actually anomalies, and those we're looking at as we perform QA to see, if that's true or if that is representing, if indicative of something else. So really very, very good news. We will have a more complete analysis of this data and a better representation, including hydrographs for all of those wells that you can review at some point in the future. But we just wanted to give you a heads up of what we're looking at, which is pretty good news in the basin. With that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Blaine. That's great news.
Matt?
John?
Yeah, Blaine, question, when you're taking you're doing physical depth measurements, right, on these wells?
Yes, both Shannon San Juan and EPC have, I think, some wells that have instrumentation where they do
that does it,
real-time recordings.
right.
So I think in some of those wells, they use that data set to pick a point. But for the most part, the vast majority are physically being measured. Yes.
That's what I was wondering. It would really be cool over the period of time from when we start irrigating until we stop, basically, if there was some way to get more data points in those. Yeah. I mean, physically, it's a matter of going out and dropping to see what the water level is. But I mean, that would really be cool to have that kind of curve to see really what the use is over a period of time during the point where a lot of the ag is using the water sources. So
you're going to see that in the future. In fact, I think here in a little bit, we're going to talk about the TACs that are working on. One of the TAC is working on expanding the monitoring network. And that's an element of their mission, is to define a subset of those wells and other wells that will be instrumented around the basin to give us that much more real-time look at what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. That's all I have. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, Kelly?
Just curious, the 3 largest bars, are those all grouped together or are those all over the place? So like the 48 that went -1 to 9 feet, 9 to 19 feet, 19 to 29 feet, are all those in generally the same area? or are they all spread out?
No, it's actually fairly uniformly distributed. You know, the areas, you know, as you would imagine, the areas where we're going to see probably better recharge, you know, adjacent to and in proximity to some of the surface water features, the Estrella and the Huerhuero and places like that. You know, we definitely saw some more evidence of increased water levels along in those corridors, but as you would expect. But it's pretty widely distributed and evenly distributed, with most wells across the basin going up and then a few coming down.
I'm just wondering if there's any sort of highlighted area that could help us in the future in as far as interconnected surface water. If there was anything that kind of showed up from this particular case because of all the rain we just got.
There, at this point, we haven't done that level of analysis, but that's something that we will do as we move forward. Yeah. And that's information that will feed to the technical advisory committees so that they can incorporate that information in the work that they're performing as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, if I might, is this data set appropriate to create a contour map?
Yes.
So I think that'd be a great visual of how this works. And again, the span is from the last monitoring in October?
No, this comparison is between spring 2022, so April 22.
Spring to spring?
Yeah, spring to spring, yeah. And last year, we produced basically a heat map based on those contour levels that we could do, but I just wasn't comfortable doing it at this time because we just haven't done the QA yet.
Yeah, and there may well be more recovery coming too.
That's
so
exactly
you know
where-
we don't necessarily know the transmissivity through the aquifers all that well throughout the basin, which would be great. And I think there's some interesting analysis that GSI has done that maybe they can present at a future PBCC meeting when it's complete. But measuring stream gauges at different points and seeing how as you go downstream, in some cases the flow drops off dramatically over a particular reach where there's more recharge than others that will form. Yeah.
I had a question actually for maybe Christopher, and Christopher kind of enlightened me years ago about this, where, you know, like you just say, Matt, this may increase from where we're taking right now, because again, the water doesn't percolate as fast in certain areas and it's still moving downward. May take a while. I think you mentioned sometimes it takes years for water to get to underground to one place to another.
Percolation, precipitation.
Right.
Yeah, that's why you see that little streamers that branch out those areas.
Yes.
That don't have access to the stream.
Very good.
Thank you. If there's no more comments from the board, let's open this up to public comment.
I have a question. Does this well monitoring include the city wells, all the 19 city wells? We know that 4 of those are supposed to be river wells, and we know that 3 of them are. But is anybody monitoring one of the biggest draws on the water table in this end of the county? Are we measuring the city wells? That would be, I have 2 water masters here now, after our GSA was approved, our GSP, excuse me, was approved. These 2 are basic what you would call water masters. So are you measuring those wells, the city wells, and showing the difference in the rise and fall of city wells?
Yeah, so I think these are just the wells that are in the monitoring network that are contributed by individuals and agencies, and I'm sure the city's monitoring their
We have,
wells.
Christopher, you want to answer that? We do have monitored.
Yeah, we monitor groundwater levels in all of our wells. Some of it we do continuously through SCADA, and some of it we do just like shown here in the beginning and end of the irrigation season.
Can those figures be included in the future so that we can know what the relationship between the monitored wells and the city wells are?
Yeah, we have a relationship with not only the county has a relationship with the city and other agencies, including San Miguel, for instance, where we do data share. So as part of this process, we will get the city Paso Robles and San Miguel's, the water levels from their networks that they share with us. That hasn't been incorporated into what I'm showing you here yet. We haven't got that done yet. That's still, usually, this is actually a little early. Usually the whole month of April, we're involved in this process, but we got the field work done for our network earlier this year in time to share it with you all. So there's still more to come.
So can they be included so we can see a reference and be able to see a difference between perhaps domestic well use and city use?
I mean, I think we have a technical advisory committee that is exploring ways to expand and improve the monitoring network, and I think that would be a great topic for them to consider.
I have one more question to Mr. Alicow. Do you monitor the golf course wells?
No, those are private wells. We don't monitor.
Private wells, but they're being drawn in behalf of the city of Paso Robles and they're not monitored. Golf courses, 3 of them in the city. So those wells are not being monitored. They're not being included. They could be drawing people's wells dry. So I think it's important that they be added. That would be for Mr. Alicow to at least ask them to go monitor their wells. I have a well and tell on my well.
That's
Yes, I know. My time's up. I'll go sit down, but I'd sure like to see those figures in comparison because you've got a lot of domestic wells here, but you're not showing what the usage is for golf courses and the city of Paso Robles.
No, thank you. Any other public comment on item 8?
Great, well, thank you. Well, at our technical advisory meeting, we saw what GSI did with what the helicopter with the hoop that was checking the ground. I don't know if everybody's seen that or understands that, but it did show where the alluvium areas are. I was surprised that because I asked if that information wasn't used for the interconnectivity when the state let us do that, because it's specifically, I showed them a photo of 229 and Rocky Canyon that on that video specifically said this is like one of the best spots to recharge the basin, and then I showed them how much water's there. The water's been flowing out of my place for over 130 days in the Wera on the west fork of it. So I'm the beginning of that. So I just think that'd be really good if people could see some of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Any public comment online, Mr. Blakesley?
No public comment online.
Okay. Let's move on to item 9. Again, Mr. Reilly, a report on the round 1 grant implementation.
Thank you, and I'll take this item, Chair Turrentine. So just to report on the grant round 1 expenses and invoice submittals. There were 2 invoices submitted to date for the DWR grant round 1, and this again is the $7.6 million grant that's for a reimbursable period of 3 years, ending in April 2025. That's the end of the reimbursable period. So again, on the screen, you can see the first 2 invoices cover a 6-month period, the last 2 quarters of 2022. And you can see the budgets to expenses that were submitted. It's a very tiny line on the screen. So as you'll see on the next slides, a lot of these projects, the meat of those projects have not begun yet. And so expenses will be start coming in as those projects get underway. Going to the next slide, there's 6 components of the round 1 grant, and we have those summarized on these slides. Component 1 is the grant admin, and you can see on each of these bar charts, the blue bars are the expected budget for each of those items. Again, this is the budget that was approved in the grant agreement, so that's something that we'll be holding to. And just a note on the y-axis, they are not the same. So just note that different components are much larger than other components, even though they may look similar. So the grant admin, we're on track there. Again, this was standing up, doing some of the beginning work required by the grant, some of the environmental forms and documentation. There's also some funding agreements that were executed with some of the component participants. And as you can see, again, the Paso Recycle Project and San Miguel Recycle Project, again, are not slated to begin, costs are not expected to begin until Q2 of 2023. And so again, you can see there's no costs have been submitted under those two components. Moving on to components 4, 5, and 6, there's been some costs submitted for data gaps and management actions. And then lastly, no costs for the component 6, the engineering supplemental studies. And that's all I have to report unless there's any questions.
Great, thank you. I think this is great information, and it'd probably be good to revisit this on a regular basis and just see how we're tracking as we make the best possible use of these grant funds. Any comments or discussion from
No
my
question for
board
Taylor.
members?
No.
Let's go ahead and open this up to public comment. Seeing none, any online?
None online.
Okay. Let's move on to item 10, report on the technical advisory committees to date.
Thank you, Chair Turrentine. So I'll be reporting on this item. As a reminder, there was 3 technical advisory committees that were set by this PBCC committee at the March 16th meeting. And those are the Expanded Monitoring Network, the Blended Irrigation Water Supply Project, and the Multi-Benefit Irrigated Land Repurposing Program. Just to let these folks know that the TACs have begun meeting. Each one has had their kickoff meeting. The Expanded Monitoring Network has actually met twice so far. And just as a reminder or a heads up that these are being facilitated by the Hallmark Group. Again, so myself is facilitating these TAC meetings. And so for this presentation and in future meetings, the reports on these TACs will likely be coming from myself. Periodically, reports may be coming from other TAC members or other technical sub-consultants. Okay, starting off with the Expanded Monitoring Network TAC. The purpose, again, is to advise and assist in the implementation of the Paso Basin Expanded Monitoring Network. A lot of this information we covered on March 16th, so I won't go into too much detail, but the key items of work is really assisting in adding 100 wells to the RMS, the Representative Monitoring Network System, and then adding 8 new monitoring wells, 3 new stream gauges, 2 climatologic stations, identifying potential rural, domestic and well impacts, and understanding areas of potential surface water and groundwater interaction. There's a secondary component, but the TAC is really focused on that primary component at this time. And right now, the first bite that this group is taking is the 100 wells. So that's really what we're focusing on right now. Of the existing network, what's the appropriate wells to add to the current network of 23 wells. Okay, moving on, you can see a summary of the TAC members, and most of them are in attendance today. There were 2 meetings, as I mentioned, April 10th and April 20th, and the group has decided that they will be meeting every 2 weeks to move through and accomplish the goals that they have. Current work items that the group is looking at, again, is recommending, as I said, the kind of first bite that they're taking is recommending a network of 100 plus wells, adding that to the existing 23 well RMS network, which again, we're starting with 100. It may ultimately be reduced, but we're starting with that larger set and determining what the correct spatial density will be. And just as a reminder, all of these things that this TAC is doing, that's coming to the PBCC. So they're providing recommendations that the PBCC can act on. They're also looking at transducer data and reviewing that data near domestic well clusters to determine what's the appropriate spatial density for monitoring in some of those domestic well cluster areas. They will be looking at doing a technical review of transducer data, discussing things like what makes a appropriate monitoring well, what's appropriate monitoring well, and again, looking at technology and different ways to monitor. Lastly, they'll be developing a draft monitoring access agreement. And so they're looking at different templates to develop a final agreement. On the timeline, just a couple things to point out. We have in the purple bar, the grant reimbursement period for this work. Again, this is funded by the grant. And so that's why the purple bar is shown, which I mentioned earlier, is reimbursable through April of 2025. The blue bar is our project target duration. So it's fairly aggressive, but our goal and our plan, our target is to get 100 wells, the 8 new wells, the new stream gauges, all that installed, hire a consultant, and onboard them, get that installed by that April 2024 timeframe. The reason why we're pushing and trying to get this in soon, of course, data is really important, but it's also, if you look at the red bar, and we have a slide on the GSP update in a little bit later, but that's one of the things that's coming up is we need to update the GSP for the 2025 update. So having this information, this data for that update is going to be a really important factor in that. And before I end the presentation on the expanded monitoring network, I wanted to briefly open it up if there's anything that one of the TAC members present would like to add to my report. Okay, great.
Thank you. Very good. The committee is, we're all working good together. We already identified, fire stations, other county properties that are already out there that don't have any monitoring, other people that already have well intels already installed. We have a list, we're putting together a list of those, and we already have people that are going to sign up as soon as we can get that form on how they feel comfortable letting us read their well. So it's gonna, I think, moving with the people that already have the well intels or people that are willing to put one in the areas, that'll make it go pretty quick. And we'll be able to get some information here on a regular basis online right to them.
That's great. Thank you.
Anyone else from the TAC want to provide a brief comment? Okay, and that completes the report on this. Would you like me to go through each TAC and then take public comment, or would you like to pause for each one?
Yeah, let's take public comment at the end of the 3 updates.
Okay. The next technical advisory committee is the blended irrigation water supply project. And again, this is assessing there's really 2 phases to this TAC, 2 work items they're looking at. Phase 1 is the feasibility and preliminary engineering study. And again, it's looking at the feasibility of taking the Nassau water, blending it with the recycled water, and blending it in a pond or some feature, and then distributing that to irrigated demand. And the goal is to reduce groundwater pumping. So this would be water use in lieu of groundwater pumping, thus reducing the overdraft in the basin. One of the key items here is to, again, develop the scope of work for the feasibility and preliminary engineering study. Moving on to, you can see the TAC members again on the screen. This TAC has met once on April 20th. And again, they are decided to meet every 2 weeks to move forward and make sure that progress is being made. Current work items is, one is to discuss any ideas and concepts for the blended project. I understand there's been a concept that's been out there for a while on a pipeline and alignment, and this group is looking at, is that the right starting point, or is there a different starting point that we should look at? So that's one of the first things that we're considering as a TAC. The second thing is in developing a pipeline and looking at where the demand, where would you deliver this water. It's developing, to assist in that analysis, the TAC thought it would be helpful to develop a priority map, considering areas of the greatest need and demand for a potential project. So if there's parts of the basin that, where there's a, large overdraft happening, maybe it makes sense to, route the water in that area if there's corresponding demand. So that's an idea to help look at the project development. And kind of part of all of this is to develop and review a list of considerations as we develop a scope of work for the RFP. And so the RFP would be, one of the deliverables here again is developing that scope to submit an RFP for a firm to perform the feasibility and preliminary engineering to see, does this project make sense? Lastly, we would be developing a list of consultants to solicit the RFP to. And again, those recommendations, as I mentioned earlier, would all be coming to the PBCC, to you folks to review. There was also some work to determine what the maximum water volumes for the Nassau and recycle project would be to use as bookends for the scope as we think through that. And also there's been concepts and thoughts about how do we assess progress towards sustainability. in lieu of groundwater use. You know, if you develop this project, but if things don't get better, were we successful? And so there's been some thought about how do we prove that this was, you know, a beneficial project in achieving sustainability. The timeline, as you can see on the screen again, I talked about the purple and the red bars. So focusing your attention on the blue bars, phase one, the project target duration is ending in just after 2024. So I think that's about 9 months from now. So the idea is that we would have the engineering and preliminary study done by that time. We'd select a consultant, have the study done by that time. Again, in the TAC understands that's aggressive. There was talk during the TAC meeting that's a heavy lift, but that's again our goal for now. And then phase two would be if it's feasible, that we'd be moving into the final design and construction of a turnout off the Nazi pipe. Sorry. Thank you, Blaine. The final design.
Final design, construction.
And construction documents. Thank you. And I know we have a few, I think I saw in the room, there's a few members from at least one on the phone. Ray, did you want to add anything?
Nothing else to add at this point.
Okay.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you. Was there anyone else that I missed in the room? Oh, sorry. I didn't see him back there. Nothing else to add? Thanks. Okay.
Great, well, thank you.
You're welcome. And then the last TAC to report on is the Miller TAC. Again, we covered the 2 phases at the March 16th meeting, so I won't repeat those. Those are in the packet. Moving on to what the TAC discussed and what we've been up to. You can see the members again on the left side of the screen. We met once on April 13th, and this group decided to meet on a monthly basis. Current work items is to review Prop 218 requirements. So there's been some discussion among the TAC of how that would work and the effectiveness of a Prop 218. And so we'll be discussing that at our next meeting. There's also a discussion, and there was a really good discussion, and you know, Blaine had a hand in developing some materials to help this idea and this concept of what do people perceive the sustainability to be, what are you willing to pay for water. And so there's some of those thoughts are going around, and we'll be continuing to discuss those at the next meeting. And then the group also wanted to discuss additional management actions or practices to reduce water demand. So there was this idea of, you know, that this is an important project, but is there ways to reduce the demand so that we don't have to jump straight to the to pulling land out of production. So that's kind of an interim step, I would say, that they want to explore. And then lastly, we'll be reviewing a proof of concept interactive pricing model the next time. So those are the items to report on the Miller TAC. Again, the timeline, there's a 18-month timeline on this project. And that's and the goal at the end of this project is, if it's successful, is to have an ordinance that that could be adopted for this program. And with that, I'd ask if there's any if any of the TAC members wanted to add anything on this item. I know there's a couple: Christopher, Matt, Patricia. Did anyone want to add anything else? Okay, and that ends is the end of my report, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Bring it back to the board, and then we'll go to public comment. John.
Yeah, thanks, man. I was going to bring this up. We have NACI Commission tomorrow, Christopher, and I just want to make sure, now that we have place of use kind of checked off a little bit here, so is the technical advisory group for NACI Commission working on ways that we can get NACI water available to this source?
That's correct. We've recommissioned the consultant that's helping us prepare the Turnback Pool sales program for NACI water, and so that's underway. We were very happy to hear that we got the place of use issues resolved, and are now moving full steam into developing this program.
All right. Yeah. Definitely is going to help the reddest part of our basin, that's for sure. So, okay, that's what I
That's great news. Any other comments? Let's open it up for public comment on this item.
Willie Cunha from Shandon. This is just a really fantastic opportunity that this grant's giving us. The faster we implement each of these sections, start collecting the data that the highly attentive monitoring committee wants you to get going on. But each of these phases are really going to help us move GSP implementation ahead, gather the data to understand our next steps in GSP implementation. And I just want to congratulate this board and the staff getting us to this point, and I'm looking forward to where we get next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Joe Irick. I'm the president of the Independent Grape Grower Association, which has almost 100 growers and 25 wineries. And I wanted to congratulate this organization on progress that you've made. I've come to some meetings in the past that look like a war zone, if anything. I think you're on the right track. Our growers are small to medium growers. Many of them put their vineyards in with more money than brains. So we're an education organization. We do 8 seminars a year. Blaine is going to be speaking in a couple of weeks, and I'd like to encourage you to make sure we have information to share with our growers. Things like water could put somebody out of business right away. They don't have enough money to make the well deeper. Because a lot of these guys have wells that are really 80, 90, 150 feet deep. And those are the ones that are going dry. So I'd like to encourage you to keep us informed because we do represent about 20% of the growers in the county. Thank you.
Any online public comment? No public comment. Seeing no more public comment.
Yes, one more. Can I speak? Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Serena Friedman here in the North County, in the San Miguel area. I didn't dial fast enough to get in on the last issue, but I want to talk about the structure of any fees imposed. Now, there are big boys and little guys, and the little guys and the big boys, we want to have, some, you talked about equity, Supervisor Gibson. We want to have reasonable fees that are not imposed, that are not oppressive, and that allow us to survive. With the heat wave we just had, a lot of us lost 30% of our grapes. We're struggling from drought that we had to deal with before the rains and the floods and the heat waves. And there has to be some sensibility in the structure of any fees imposed and any limits to irrigation that are unreasonable for certain types of grapes that require more water, like Syrah, for example. And we need to be actively involved before final decision-making takes place. And we would all like to be informed so that specifically structuring fees is on the agenda and water allowance to notify us and have community forums, public speaking on those issues prior to making decisions of presentations and finality.
Thank you. So seeing no more requests to speak, move on to the next item. Thank you very much. It's very exciting that the TACs are so quickly making real progress. Thank you, Blaine and Christopher, all the staff.
Thanks for everybody
efforts.
volunteering on that too.
Yeah.
Good.
So item 11, report on the 2025 GSP update.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This will just be quick, but we want to get it on the radar. We have a 2025 update that will be due for our groundwater sustainability plan. Seems like that's a long way off, but the reality is it's not. It's something that we're probably going to need to start on very, very soon. We really only have 7 regular PBCC meetings before the GSP is due, so that really gives you an idea how limited the time frame we have. What we're doing, or our recommendation is let me back up. Just to restate, the DWR has recommended that our GSP be approved, but they've also indicated that there will be recommended corrective actions that will be associated with that final approval. Those corrective actions will need to be addressed in the updated GSP. So we do not have those yet. We're still waiting those. And then what we're recommending is that the PBCC staff develop recommendations to be presented for the update to the PBC on the next regular meeting, July 26th.
Any comments, questions?
If I might, Mr. Chair.
Please.
So tying this back to the previous item, our technical advisory committees are considering some significant, the preliminary work on some significant management actions. Is that going to time out properly so we can strengthen the implementation chapters of this plan?
Yeah, that was the intent when Taylor was pointing out the aggressive schedules that we've set out for each of these TACs. Those schedules are so aggressive so that information and the results of their work can be incorporated into the updated GSP.
Next year, 20, yeah.
Including the hydrological effect of each of those. Are we going to be able to get a technical estimate as to what benefit the basin gets from these, as well as the cost and the details of how they're constructed?
Yes, that we envision would be part of the GSP update, is to, we do have a groundwater model that was used to develop the GSP. I'm sure we would like to make some improvements to that groundwater model, but use that model then to help us understand what the impacts will be to the basin as each of these initiatives that the TACs are working on, and others that are still to come, will have on the basin.
Hey, I think it's no secret to my colleagues at the table here that is my singular focus on strengthening the GSP is in the implementation. It's time to show impact on
for sustainability.
Yeah, headed in the right direction. So I'm hopeful and be interested to watch progress in that direction. Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing staff recommendations for that update plan at our next meeting, but I'm assuming that will include recommendations for engaging a consultant, whether it's consultants we've worked with on the past on the GSP or new ones for revising it.
Yeah, my expectation is as the PBCC staff gets together to start, developing our recommendations, part of that will be to talk about what elements of the plan need to be, worked on through a consultant. Certainly, like the modeling initiative would require consultant assistance.
Right.
We don't need a formal action, but I'm hearing that there is a general committee direction to come back on July 26th.
Yeah.
I think everybody's nodding their head.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's open up for public comment on this item 11. None in the room. Is there any public comment online?
None on Zoom. Is there anyone on the phone that would like to make a comment? Okay. None.
Okay, let's move on to item 12, approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Entertain a motion for approval.
Just actually have a correction.
Or correction comments, yeah.
Sorry. Like halfway through, my last name drops, or beginning drops the S, and then the end has the S. So it's Dodds with an S. So
thank you.
So I would motion we approve with the correction.
I'll second that.
I guess I should probably take public comment first. Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take a close look at those names. Make sure those are approved for the next round.
So any public comment on item 12, the minutes from last meeting? Seeing none. We have a motion and a second.
Call for the question.
Will you call the roll?
No need.
Okay.
but yeah.
Voice vote?
If there's
All
ayes.
in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Approved.
Who is the second on the motion?
I was.
Thank you.
Item 13, I believe we have some additional members to approve for some of these technical advisory committees.
Yes, just a quick update on this. So this committee approved the members on the March 16th meeting. There was a few names that inadvertently were not on the list that you approved. These folks have attended the kickoff meetings, and staff is recommending approval to the following tasks.
So that's the MLR and then the expanded network.
That is correct.
Those two.
Yes.
Any public comment on this item? Seeing none.
Move to approve the folks who would like to be appointed or be on.
I'll second.
Let's take a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Approved. And item 14, opportunity for each of the GSAs to provide a verbal update, if any. First up is the City of Paso Robles.
I don't really have anything, but we do have Christopher Lackle, definitely our water man here, so.
Yeah, nothing much. Just in regard to groundwater level monitoring in and around the airport, I am working with the county and DWR to site a dedicated groundwater monitoring well out there. I've already talked with the airport manager, and it looks like we can find a site that meets everybody's needs. And so I've got some draft agreement language that I'm going to have our legal department review and see if we can't get a dedicated groundwater level monitoring well out there for the monitoring program.
Great. County of San Luis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll note what I know and turn it over to Blaine. We are now expecting to bring the item of Estrella El Pomar's request to become a GSA to the board on June the 6th. Perhaps as well, we'll do the equity statement for formal board endorsement that day, make it a festival of Paso Robles groundwater. And appreciate very much, I saw in the packet here, the statement of support from the city, and in any statement from the CSD would be welcomed.
They're bringing it up today or tomorrow.
Excellent, excellent. So there's that. In other news, I could just say in general, and then I'll let Blaine fill in the blanks, that Blaine and I have taken new steps to further coordinate his groundwater work with our public works, surface water work, and other water work. We have a water resources division within public works that handles all the other water things that we deal with. And so we've had some productive meetings, making sure that the county as an entity is on board as these things get more intense and more complicated. So I think that's going to bring benefit to the process. Beyond that, I can't think of anything.
Just one other quick update. I think at our last meeting, I let you guys know that the county had made application for a grant through the California Department of Conservation for the multi-benefit land repurposing program. I think it's the grant amount is about $9 million. 8.8 million. It was submitted. We found out last week that and we're going to be interviewed with the Department of Conservation on Friday. And there's a number of the folks in this room that are going to participate in that interview. We feel like we have a really strong application. The short list is pretty small, so I feel like we're well positioned to hopefully be awarded for additional funds for that program. So with that, I want to say thank you, because Shannon San Juan participated, the city of Paso Robles, San Miguel's been part of it. Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance has been part of it, SLO County Farm Bureau, Upper Salinas Las Tablas RCT resource, and the EPC as well. So lots of broad support in this program or in this application, and we're very hopeful that we're going to be successful. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Any updates from San Miguel?
Nothing much. We're moving full steam ahead on a project and making some good progress. So hopefully we'll have something next time we meet.
Thank you. One brief update from Shannon San Juan Water District. Following the governor's executive order middle of last month, temporarily removing or suspending the permit process for stormwater recharge projects. Our board encouraged any members, landowners within our district to avail themselves of this opportunity and potentially make some funds available for reimbursement of rental pumps and things like that. And we, between March 20th and April 6th, so a little over 2 weeks, when flood flows were high in San Juan Creek, we had 2 pumps running, flooding one field and sprinkling another. And we put about 35 acre feet of water back into the basin through recharge. So, you know, it's not a huge amount. We thought of it as kind of a pilot project. I think it'd be great for this board to discuss in the future, as we've discussed in the past, you know, where are there feasible places for small projects? Obviously, this doesn't happen every year, but let's be prepared next time it does, that we can do this all over. And I think there were some other projects that are similar efforts elsewhere in the basin at EPC that I don't have the details to speak about. But you know, I think that's just some additional good news.
I just thought it was kind of ironic, though, the fact that, you know, he kind of says this at the end of the winter season. I wish he'd be a little more proactive, and we can maybe take that moving forward in the next season too. That'll definitely be a good thing.
I would like to ask a question about that.
Yes, go ahead.
Anne Myrie. I just would like to ask a question about that. Did the governor waive things like Fish and Game and Fish and Wildlife and Army Corps of Engineers?
Yep, a lot of the red tape, I think not all of it.
Permits were waived?
Yeah.
When you decided to spread some water?
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's remarkable. I just wondered because I thought, oh my goodness.
Yeah,
I've certainly seen people get in trouble for doing that.
I think he's running for president, right?
I don't know if that's going to impress.
Yeah, that doesn't fall within the scope of.
But it is impressive inside California.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
So let's move on to item 15, committee member comments. If there's any in addition to the updates provided, I have none.
Yeah, I was going to mention that we were up in Sacramento, actually, along with Bruce Gibson at the city leaders up in Sacramento talking, and we actually went to DWR. Our Paso City's looking for a grant to further our recycled water line system. And we're in a mix of about 80 applicants, and not that we're politicking or anything, but we want to make sure they know who we are. And it was a very good meeting with DWR. We met with one of the directors and a couple online, and they'll be making their decisions soon, I guess, on who's going to get that kind of grant. There's several of them actually, but it'd be important if we can get that. We can extend our recycled water line further out to the east. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Christopher, that would be pretty much all the money we have needed to do the system, correct? Or close to it?
A little over half.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I know we have some already on board, but this would be additional to that. So, so anyway, it was a good meeting. Actually, we talked to Lieutenant Governor's office and also Caltrans a little bit about 46 East Overpass. So we were really knocking on doors along with the city leaders meeting. I think Bruce was up there for CSAC too. So other than that, that's all I had.
Great.
Yeah. Among the many issues that the California State Association of Counties, or CSAC, is a lot of conversation about damage from the storms and the ability to somehow ease at least a little bit stream bed alteration permits so that we have more control, a bit more control of storm flows. Remains to be seen just how far we can get with that, but it's a thought, and obviously want to make sure that that works with the other parts of our water management efforts. So we'll see. To be more to come later.
Any comment?
I don't have anything to say.
Okay, item 16. Our next meeting is July 26th, followed by October 25th. Okay. Any future items that we want to make sure are included on subsequent agendas?
Just the equity letter that Bruce is going to have us. Hopefully we get it all back, and maybe not the next meeting. So we could find the next one, October.
You're thinking, I mean, maybe by July 26th, we could at least report on the actions taken by all four of the GSAs.
I would definitely have an agenda item that we're
yeah, so we can talk about it.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
As part of the GSP update, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay. Item 18, correspondence.
Yes, we did receive one letter from the city of Paso Robles in support of the EPC request to become a GSA, and that's in your packet.
Yeah, in fact, let me take public comment on 17 and 18.
As far as the EPC water district, the state was pretty clear that June 30th of 2017, you had to be a GSA, and that didn't happen. And LAFCO had some rules that were supposed to be done, and exemptions were made so that they could continue to be a water district. And I turned in 1,700 petitions for people that live over the basin that didn't want them, because all this stuff happened after they lost AB 2453. So we're not looking at the rest of the constituents that live out over the basin that have issues with people that are just looking out for their private interests of their group. 100 or 200 people that belong to one individual group that doesn't even meet the water code. They have 4 violations. They do not have 50% of the basin. They do not have any system of works. And so they don't meet the criteria to be 2 miles apart and be a water district. And all of these things were overlooked, but you're asking people to abide by the water code and abide by the different laws. And then we got people that want to be part of the organization that aren't doing that. And the original board, most of the people sitting here voted against them of participating just as a quiet member. And they did add themselves onto the original grant that we got to do the GSP, and then had to be removed because they weren't supposed to be on there. That was committing fraud. I have the paperwork with me. So I have nothing personal against any of these people, but I don't consider that being a good player or part of a cooperative organization, looking out just for your own beneficial use, while the other people don't have the same representation that are sitting in this part of the area. And I don't live over the basin. I live in the watershed. I need to know who to send the bill to for all my recharge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Jerry Ray with the EPC Water District. And I just want to make a few brief comments. We've been hearing this litany of stuff about how we are not a water district. We are a water district. We've met every single qualification. The state of California, we are approved water district. That's gone through LAFCO and all that. The other thing I hear is this concept, we don't have any works. Well, in the world I come from, the process that usually happens is you form an organization, you do your research, you do your studies, you develop a plan, you get that plan financed, and then you build works. Works just don't magically appear out of anywhere. They come out of careful planning and all that sort of stuff. To say that we're not a water district because we don't have works is ridiculous. I think about 4 years ago, a group of us, including some folks from the city, went up and visited a water district in the Napa area. They've been a water district for 20 years. And finally it became, after 20 years, they'd done some minor things. The city of Napa said, we have recycled water. And all of a sudden that water district decided to build works. And in fact, they take substantial amounts of city of Napa and deliver them directly to vineyards in the Canaris region. So to say we don't have works is just, doesn't make any sense. Takes careful planning, takes hard work, and you have to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I might. When the matter of considering GSA status for EPC came before our board the first time, all the legal aspects of that decision were well analyzed, and it was clear that the board had the discretion. It chose not to take it. You can be assured that in the consideration that'll come on June 6th, all those legal aspects will be reviewed again, and we will proceed only if we have the proper legal basis. So yeah. I don't see any impediment to that. People can have a variety of opinions as to whether they like that or not, but in terms of a legal action, it's perfectly, perfectly well justified.
Yeah, and to be clear, that determination is going before the Board of Supervisors, not before this body here, the Paso Basin Board. Right. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion, yes.
Got a first?
Second that.
Okay.
Second. All in favor?
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
So basic med, I gotta look.
Yeah, well, let's see.